Chapter 20. The Overhead Sun Sector.
Zentran sensed two lookalikes on the deck above him. He erased the memory crystal's data, disconnected it from the ship's computer, and placed it in his inside pocket. Switching off the computer, he strolled out of the control room and along the corridor that led to the upper deck. With a starship captain's authority, he addressed the lookalikes.
What is your business on my freighter?
There was no response, and he wondered if he'd overdone the force of intention in his question. They pushed their way past him, but their lack of decorum was almost apologetic as they showed him a council badge.
A routine check
Was eventually verbalized. Zentran followed them down to the lower deck and recognized once more their weak but discernible telepathic ability. They made for the control cabin and inspected the computer. Zentran looked on with interest. He felt their prying feelers into his mind. There was no trace they'd noticed the presence of his mental screen.
What are you looking for?
He asked politely. There was no response, but he ascertained that the freighter's computer had drawn more current from the docking supply than usual for a dormant ship. They'd sensed elevated mental activity as well. His elation with the memory crystal's data had probably triggered their senses. The morning Sun Club incident had them on edge.
Has your computer been on?
Oh, yes it has.
Zentran smiled boyishly.
I'm off duty and finished a game of Quiven I was busy with on my last space haul.
They turned to look at him with their emotionless stares. Their electronic probes searched his mind again, but found only what Zentran put there for them.
There has been some trouble with your computer before. A council specialist was sent on your last trip to monitor it.
That's right. There was a bug in the override system. It's been upgraded and appears to be functioning properly now.
Zentran moved towards the computer and motioned to switch it on.
Would you like to check it?
No.
They said in unison and left without another word. With the memory crystal in his inside pocket, Zentran waited a while before following them to the upper deck. There was no sign of any lookalikes in the docking bay or in the aircar pad now. Feeling a little concerned, he parked his aircar on the pad outside his quarters and considered the exchange he'd just had. Inside, he perceived Zack and Venru to be there. Venru stood in the food preparation area, conversing with Leia. Venru was a beautiful woman, but if one looked beyond Leia's mundane maintenance attire, she was certainly a fetching woman as well. A bored Zack sat in the living area, floating a glass across the tabletop. Zentran caused the glass to float back. Sensing Zentran's game, Zack forced it across the table again. Amusement followed as their opposing forces shattered the glass. Splintering glass brought the concerned girls, but Zentran, opening the door from the outside and entering, distracted them.
Good sequence, everyone. I trust you've all met. Leia, these are my friends, Zack and Venru.
Sorry, sir. Your glass broke. I don't think I put it on the table properly.
Venru helped Leia in picking up the pieces, not knowing it wasn't her place to do so. She was no longer in mystery about Zack and Zentran's abilities, and the unusually fine fragments gave her a good idea as to what had just transpired. Leia was only worried that the mishap had somehow been her fault, and paid little attention other than cleaning up the mess. Leia left quietly, and Zack noticed Zentran's trepidation.
We're going to have to move faster. They're suspicious of me.
They're suspicious of everyone.
Before we leave for Delta 5, I want to get into their computer. It's it seems there are no access codes if you follow a set entry pattern.
Zentran smiled, hiding his apprehension, and turned to Venru.
How do you feel, knowing about Zack, Fora, and me?
It seems a little unreal. But then again, it doesn't. It makes sense now. There was always something larger than life about the three of you.
There was a pause. Venru hadn't finished what she wanted to say.
I've often wondered how to gain spiritual abilities from the realm. The type of abilities you have. It seems to me that it should be our natural state.
She still wasn't finished. Previous life experiences were in the process of updating as she adjusted to new concepts.
Is it possible for me to gain the abilities you and Zack have?
Everyone has the capacity to some degree,
Zack answered.
but it is not clear how to enhance the energy from lower levels. We do know that deprogramming reduces abilities. Perhaps someone in the future, when the council suppression has been eliminated, will figure out how to fully restore the natural state for everyone.
Zentran looked intently at Venru.
Is the concept of reincarnation real to you?
Being a musician and having moved in trendy circles on Delta 2, anti-establishment ideas like reincarnation are fashionable. Such cliches are uttered without understanding or sincerity, however. And there are weird concepts attached, like being reborn as cats, rats, and other animals. Beneath all of this, though, there was something about having lived before that rang true for me.
Zack moved across to Venru and put his arm around her shoulder.
You're right. There is a lot of discrediting information. The council puts it out through their covertly controlled news media. Far-fetched and ridiculous stuff that no one could believe.
Venru looked at Zack and smiled. Zentran smiled as well. The girl was a credit to him,
Let's go by and pick up Fora.
suggested Zack.
The Morning Sun Club is too hot right now, but we could go to that other hangout of yours, overlooking the lake in the overhead sun sector.
The four climbed the same synthetic marble stairs that Zentran and Fora had used not long before. Zack had also frequented the scenic resort in earlier Sun Revolutions with various female acquaintances. Those were sequences before he'd left Delta 4B, before he'd found Venru. They sat down under a sun umbrella on the open balcony and admired the freshwater sea's view, reaching well beyond the horizon.
With the magnificence of this planet, it's easy to forget the sinister control the council exerts on it.
Pieces continued to fall into place in Venru's understanding.
Do you think it's possible to change that?
She searched the faces of her friends for a sign that might confirm what she wanted to hear. Although, who could stand against the might of the council? They controlled the Confederation and beyond. Still, she wanted to believe that their small group could do it, however unlikely. Zack ventured an answer.
Yes, it's possible.
Zentran and Fora smiled, but they knew what they were up against. However strong Zentran and Zack were, and even with the unknown extent of her potential, they might all succumb in their quest for freedom. Bleak consideration had no place in their understanding though, especially for Venru's benefit. Here's the sequence. She hadn't even known the extent of the degradation they were taking responsibility for. Venru reached for Zack's hand and cast her vision out over the expanse of water. She felt awkward. There seemed so little she could contribute. But whatever the outcome, she hoped Zack would not find her wanting. Zack knew. He squeezed her hand, stood up, and led her down to the beach. She skipped through the sand, throwing up her arms with the carefree nature that comes easily to an artist. Zentran and Fora watched them from the balcony.
How did Zack get so lucky to find her, Zen?
I have an idea that he had some assistance.
None of us can make it on our own.
Yes. And without Zack, I'd never have met you. He deserves her as well as any help he might have had.
On the beach, Zack discarded his shirt, revealing a suntan matching Venru's natural golden brown complexion. His dark brown hair blowing in the breeze complemented her black hair, streaming as she danced around him. He laughed, and so did she. Others on the beach smiled at her antics. Her spirit was contagious, and a better-looking couple anyone would be hard-pressed to find. Zentran looked back at Fora. She turned and looked at him as the wind blew strands of blonde hair across her face. Moving them away, she looked deep into Zentran's eyes. There, in the depths, she found the comfort she sought. He too reveled in the wonder of her and her innermost thoughts. Outwardly, a princess would envy her looks. Inside, a little girl battled to come to grips with a strength that frightened her. There was harmony with them. At this moment, it was even more so. It brought something like exhilaration, but different. Everything, and at the same time nothing. Intricacy, interchanged with simplicity, like the complex skyline of a city, dissolving to where the blue of the sky meets the blue of the freshwater sea. Blue faded to an absence of color. Brilliant white, made up of every color. Sometime later, they gradually withdrew from within each other. It was difficult to say how long they'd been in that state. Time had taken on an unreal perspective, where eternity and an instant became interchangeable. Around them on the balcony, people carried on as before, unaware of what Zentran and Fora had just experienced. Fora reflected.
In that, whatever it was, I got a glimpse of what love is.
It flashed by me as well. What was it?
It's nothing.
Yes, nothing. And at the same time, everything.
They laughed. There was no sign of Zack and Venru on the beach where they'd last been seen. Fora laughed again, pointing to a rock further on. Under it was Zack and Venru's neatly folded clothes.
Skinny dipping.
Zentran stood up and, taking Fora's hand, moved towards the stairway leading down to the beach.
Not a bad idea.
The water was cool and refreshing against their naked bodies as they dove into the depths. Colorful fish swam around them. Fora picked up a shell from the bottom and made for the surface. With a splash, she took a breath. She put one arm around Zentran's neck to support herself as she showed it to him. It was pure white, heart-shaped, but not perfectly symmetrical. The surface curved gradually back, concealing a cavity behind it. Between the lobes, it had a hole. Taking a deep breath, she put it into her mouth to allow her full use of both arms. Beckoning Zentran, she swam to the bottom again. There she pulled out a thin stem from an underwater plant, threaded it through the hole in the shell, and tied it around Zentran's neck. The shell bounced on his chest as they swam to the surface. Fora felt his arms around her waist, assisting her. Standing in the shallows of a cove, she lifted herself to him and encircled his waist with her legs.
I'll remember this moment, always.
She was right. In a far-off unknown future, the power of intention to hold dear this special moment would reveal this memory to her when all other remembrances had been lost. Zentran pulled her to him and felt the firmness of her breasts against his chest. What was a man to do? Back in Zentran's apartment, he felt the heart-shaped shell tied around his neck as the four sat around a table.
To take advantage of the proximity of Delta 4b and Delta 5 in their relative orbits, we have to leave for Delta 5 next sequence. I'll have a crack at the Council computer from a terminal in Alpha 1, just as the new sequence starts.
Fora shivered.
What if the system does need an access code?
She thought of everything that could go wrong and wondered if the endeavor was worth the risk, but said nothing. She knew Zentran would not waver.